Summary for lay audience. The following is a theoretical treatise regarding the structure of the human mind. This is a psychological model and is meant to explain the similarities and differences between older models, how the theory is or can be validated, and what the modality provides in terms of usage. As well, a complete discourse is contained in the final chapter where the model itself is explained in detail. The temporal dynamic of the human mind uses both a tier system and linear description to elucidate the various functions of identity, person, and form, or in the jargon, id, ego, and superego. This is an inexact representation, but works to explain that the mind is represented in 5 major parts, 3 that are displayed in a cycle of 28 days. Further to this cycle, the mind is structured according to developmental periods and as such demonstrates a congruent pattern which can be used to correlate effective trauma with origin of injury. The basis for this theory is a foundation of genetic coding and inheritance, both learned from nurturance and as part of the physical nature, as well as part and parcel with adaptive changes during a lifespan. Simply put, our mind is based on the function of the body, identity, which is essentially static and stayed, creating a system of interactive relation, the person, subsequently manifesting in a relativity that is an entire conceptualization of the individual as form, given life experience as compared to personal perspective. The idea of a model of the psyche helps to identify given components of personality. That is to say, helps assess and develop insight as to one's own characteristics and individuality. Using measures that coincide in similarity with the model's own structure, it is easier to integrate information developed during therapy with treatment specifically targeting the areas of concern. To validate this model, existing classifications are compared and explained with the defining qualities of each state, stage, and form, given in detail though generalized for functional simplification and readability. Growth in the human being is a fascinating subject, and using a psyche congruent modality to present findings is useful in developing comprehensive wisdom as enlightenment through transcendental substantiation. So this is what we have ahead of us. Once again, just presented in case anyone wants to freeze frame and kind of rough in where they might want to skip ahead to. This will be presented both in parts and as a complete sort of lecture, and all these can be found on my YouTube page. Just continue with the preface before we move on to getting into the actual structure and chapters of the dissertation of this thesis. Preface. Many psychologists have attempted to develop a complete model of the complexity of the human mind. This has taken the shape of linear, temporal, and dynamic modalities, but thus far, no one seems to have had success incorporating all elements into a single system. That is what is attempted herein. Drawing from the historical versions of psychological modality, the temporal dynamic of the human mind, or simply psyche, creates a concrete yet dynamic system whereby earlier stages, states, and forms are structured specific to age, while the latter stages, those proximal to death, are more fluid in experience, and as such considered thus in the developed model. What remains of psychoanalysis is a partially similar three-tier structure that includes a genetic hereditary element, an emotional component, and a manifest formation of the three, with a hierarchy that includes spiritual embodiment above and beyond the earthen form, yet part therewith. This is elevated consciousness, as defined in the domain concepts of self-life and will-mind. They are as autonomous volition in the purest form of the sense and meaning. Through comparison and contrastation, synonymous with the other participles of higher cognition, the presented model is validated by previous attempts to classify levels of thought or stages of growth and the patterns that manifest as a result. The temporal dynamic is the first to incorporate genetic inheritance in representation of a cyclic pattern, not ignoring the salient evolutionary features of the mind, but describing them in a manageable form. The total actuality probably far more complex. All that said, there is much that needs to be done to validate this model. Computational analysis of imaging has advanced to the point that some verification of patterns of brain and neural development following a predetermined course can be made, and this should be conducted whether or not it proves the model to be sound, simply for the benefit of neuroscience. Hormonal testing and identification continue at an exponential rate of development, and this science can prove that unique compositions of neurotransmitters encode information in a particular manner. This treatise merely presents an idea that I believe to be valid and a useful tool in the production of measures used to address psychiatric disturbance and the impairment thereof. The document itself does the explaining, and I will leave it to that purpose.